This is a very short question, and it has to do or is related with panels 5 to 7 of our exhibition. In them, the intermediate hall of the homes that we show activate and intensify their relationship with the landscape around it. And it is not related with any aspect of the speech. What is your opinion about the spatial impact of the intermediate hall in these houses based on the graphical representation? And I would say that in many of those houses, in the examples that we chose for this question, except one of them, all others only have a hall of a simple height. In other words, they're not of double height. So we give you the floor now for this answer.
The thing about a single height hall to me is that it's not, in the manner of Penshurst, it's not a double height space such as the medieval halls always were. And I think it is reduced, I think that in being reduced down to a single height space, it loses that that quality, that idea of being a focal point within a larger complex of buildings. It becomes really no more than a circulation space, albeit a wide circulation space, and doesn't respond to the notion of the middle hall. That's my interpretation.
In this intervention, I would like to briefly show you the house for Victor Chayo in Bogota, which is shown in panel number 6, which was designed by the Italian Bruno Dioli in 1948. One of the examples that we have considered as a modern interpretation of an intermediate hall. This house of 2 stories is in a rectangular lot in a semi-isolated manner. The volumetric configuration is a pool which is covered by 2 areas with a block of smaller dimension that is in the western side. In the main volume, this part is the axis of the center, which has the intermediate hall of double height. This goes in a longitudinal section with the dining and goes towards the back patio, and also with the study of library. And all these areas are also related to an interior patio that illuminates the spaces of the hall through the sides, through a double height area that show these enormous stairs. This patio can be moved around in all the area and gives you the different areas of social aspects where this represents more of these. And the emptiness in the hall added to the patio and the staircase allows spatial relationships that are unusual with the second floor areas that are more intimate or private. Okay, in my comment, I expect to give value to the capacity that some specific examples have. Both of the houses that have the intermediate hall as well as those that have a patio. And I want to refer this to the subject that has been mentioned several times of the capacity of these architectural types of building according to an idea of a city. In panel 7, which is a complement of panels 8 and 9, they precisely analyze aspects that are very concrete and the specific of the wealth of some works. And these are all authors' works that, due to their characteristics, could have a general value, some of them, within the hypothesis of alternative that I made yesterday when I referred to the theory of Ludwig Simon about the city understood as a combination between low stories and high story height. In my interpretations before, I talked about the Bermudez house, which is a beautiful illustration case of to answer this question that has the intermediate hall, but there is no footprint of the neo-Tudor style or anything like it. This house is an example of how you could have houses with intermediate halls in a row, forming like urban areas with townhouses with a back patio with a garden. As a complement of this, the houses south of Obregón and Valenzuela and other authors are houses in a precinct where you could have like a carpet of these gardens. Here we illustrate the Prieto house of Ricardo Barrizosa and Prieto as an example. This is a case of a house of great spatial and domestic characteristics where that interior world doesn't correspond with the humbleness of the only facade that is towards the street. Both traditions, both in the houses that are grouped with the intermediate hall and the houses that have patios and porches, evoke the inheritance from Spain and could nurture the program of low houses to build a Bogota that is similar to Lafayette Park's experiment and Caldwell also in Detroit. But that never occurred, actually.
Neil, again, my question is really aimed at your broader expertise as a historian of mid-century houses. The house that you'll see in the slides that appear on the screen alongside me, which is called the Casa Hernando Santos, this is a house which has got a house from the early 1960s, which has got a series of great hall-like elements within a space which is in other respects a modern space. It has got, for example, a raised platform at the end. It has screens. It has a double height. It has, I think, probably most relevantly to this discussion, it has behind that raised platform, you can see it now, the stairs lead off it. It has an entrance way through to the more private parts of the more private areas of the house. In many respects, it is, even if it is doing it in an abstract way or in a conceptual way, it is taking some of those elements from the middle hall and applying them to a completely different type of house. I wondered whether you could tell us how, in your experience, the architects of the houses that you have studied, I'm thinking of the Californian ones, how they have been able to turn what are essentially in many cases simple entrance ways into areas which carry more architectural weight because of the way in which they have some reminiscence, conscious or not, of the elements of great halls. Just before you came on to join us, Neil, I showed the rest of the panel the cover of your Peter Wormersley book. You have there a double height house. You don't have a raised dais. You have a lowered part, in fact, for the dining hall. But I know that this is an area in which you have a great deal of interest. And I wondered if you could tell us how you saw the connections between the mid-century houses and the traditional patterns of hall houses.
I think the memory, if that's the right way of putting it, the memory of the middle hall in modern architecture is really a rather fascinating idea. Whether it comes from the English medieval buildings or not, I couldn't really say. But I would probably look back to Le Corbusier's Maison Citroën, for instance. The double height spaces there, his La Roche-Jeanneret house, which I mentioned earlier, although I couldn't remember the complete name, the La Roche-Jeanneret house in Paris with the triple height space. That way of exploding space is very much characteristic of the early 20th century. And the Raum plan also, which came from Austria, is another way of looking at it. The sort of architecture I have studied in post-war years, such as Peter Wormersley, which has just been mentioned. He was an English architect living in Scotland, but the house on the cover of my book was in Yorkshire in England, a house he built for his brother. Buildings such as that and exactly contemporaneous buildings in California, all as part of the case study house program, do, I think, respond very well to the images that you have in your exhibition, in this section of the exhibition. The California buildings tend to be single-story houses, but having said that, perhaps the most important of the case study houses published through Arts and Architecture magazine, the Eames House in Pacific Palisades of 1949, is a double height space. The main living space is a double height space. And another one that came rather later by one of the case study house architects, Pierre Koenig, is the house he built for himself in about 1985 in Brentwood in Los Angeles. And that has a triple height space in the center. But both the Eames House and the Koenig House, when one approaches the double height or triple height space, one approaches it through a much more compressed entrance area, a small corridor, a passageway, something like that. And then the space explodes as one goes into it, and you look up. And in the case of the Koenig House, you look up again because the ceiling is much, much higher. And I think that is what one sees here, possibly in the Hernando Santos house, which I think is really rather fascinating. I don't want to comment on the brickwork, but just to say that this strikes me as a rather Japanese way of finishing a building on the outside, not a particularly European way. The Casa Jose Prieto, 1957, to me that's straight out of the California Case Study House program, and the integration of garden space within the house, the perspective drawing that is on your panel, brick walls or solid walls of some sort on either side, opening into a landscape beyond, a large fireplace, its canopy suspended from the ceiling, the framework of the house extending again out into the landscape, so you're never quite sure whether you're inside or outside. There's an ambiguity there. If I'm within the frame of the house, surely I'm in the building, but there's no roof, so maybe I'm outside the building. These questions are sent to challenge us. And again, moving through the panels, another one which came up in the discussion just now, the Casa Roberto Pradilla. Again, that's a building which I think fits into this modernist way of thinking quite clearly, and the processional stairs coming down, which was something that Alan Powers mentioned yesterday, the way that the hostess might come down once she's ready to receive her guests, who are all standing at the bottom, chatting, holding glasses of champagne or whatever it is. The Gabriel Hernandez house, again, something that could be part of the California Case Study House program, a fabulous perspective drawing showing indoor and outdoor space once more, reminds me very much of Rafael Soriano or Pierre Koenig, who were building just this sort of stuff at this time. That's 1953. So I think what we have here is very much modern architecture, but one can only relate it tangentially back to hall houses. It's gone through so many washes since the middle hall of the medieval buildings that we actually get a very different type of architecture. And I don't mean stylistically, but I mean in terms of its expression of space and its relationship to the outdoors. I think that's all I need, or all I want to say on that.